in comparison to something like say a 529 plan or whatever, where you might be looking to save capital for, a child's education and everything, there's a lot of rules and restrictions to those, and they vary state by state. Whereas here, if you wanted to do something like that, you still could do it using this program. But even when your child goes to education, the money comes out of that account to fund education. The Child Millionaire platform is still growing because you have this permanent contract with the life insurance company that's put in place. And you did it not for the insurance benefit. You did it because of constant cash accumulation over a human lifespan.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're calling in from, and those that will listen to the recording of this presentation. Thank you for taking the time out to listen to what we have to share. And so I want to introduce my good friend. He's an entrepreneur, he's a podcast host, he's an author, he's a generational wealth expert, and really looking forward to having Richard share some really great information about how you address a number of things, going forward financially. So without further ado, Richard, please take it away.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, John. Really appreciate it. So that's wonderful. And, John, thank you again for the invitation to join and to share, to be a part of this experience and to teach a little bit, because I know in all of our great conversations, this is something that you're really passionate about. And to be able to walk through some of the information we're going to cover today, I think is going to be really beneficial for a lot of people. And I just appreciate you for, spearheading that and bringing, again, you've been sending a lot of great emails. I love the emails you do and send up to your list, and we're always seeking to add value, which is something I really appreciate about you. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to share my screen. So I've got a few pictures here. Obviously, if you're seeing this, you can probably tell that I'm a proud dad. Hopefully we've got other proud parents who are either on the call or are going to be seeing this, or grandparents even perhaps. And I want to just talk a little bit about this and what's the genesis of what we're going to discuss tonight. So you're going to see here, I'm going to point, there's this smiley little kid, and then there's this smiley little kid. Well, this is my son, Nathan, and this is my daughter, Nora. Now, obviously they're a little bit older now than when these pictures were taken. But what you'll notice, there's this incredible black book in the background there. Now, the premise of what we're going to be covering tonight about how we can implement and create a generational wealth plan for people, it really stems from this book. And you'll see, here's a copy I have in my hand. This book entered my life in August of 2009, and it just completely changed and revolutionized everything for me. It's easily the book that's created the single greatest impact in my life, in all facets of my life. My finances, how I think about money, how I think about many things, including relationships, economics. And what it's done is it's bridged the gap for me and my family towards connecting with so many other wonderful and great people, like-minded people like John, who are out there sharing the incredible work that this book provides. And it's really about how to take more control over your financial life, and how can you do that in such a way where it benefits yourself and other members of your family in such a way that you guys just are able to have more control over the dollars that you're using already. You're already spending capital on all the things that matter, the things that you prioritize. And how can we optimize some of that money so that it can do more for you than just one thing? And that's kind of the genesis of what we're going to be discussing tonight. Now, I've got this picture of this wonderful fellow right here. This is the author of that book. If you're listening in and you're not familiar, his name was R. Nelson Nash. And Nelson was my personal friend and mentor. I loved him dearly. He was one of the most incredible human beings, in my opinion, to walk planet Earth. I can't speak enough to how he's impacted me in so many areas of my life. Now, he was married to his wife, Mary. Again, Nelson passed away here about 2.5 years ago. He was married to Mary for a little over 60 years. I think it was 63 years. And, Nelson and his wife, Mary, before he passed away, they had not seen a traditional bank as, you and I know it for financing needs and that sort of thing for over 30 years before Nelson passed away. Now, it took him a long time to get to that stage. In fact, it took Nelson 13 years to fire his bankers. He talks about that in the book, Becoming Your Own Banker, how he was able to implement that process. And he didn't really realize he could do this until, interest rates spiked in the early 80s and there was all this inflation and things that took place. And he was in really dire straits. But he was able to use that experience, and he had like an epiphanous moment. How could I take what I've already got, these resources around me, redirect how and reprioritize how I'm spending capital to create a banking system that I own and control? And so it's a really powerful story. Again, I would really encourage anyone to get the book. It's only 92 pages. And the best place to get that book is from John. John, you got those available, that if anyone's interested, they can get a copy.
I do.
Really incredible. Many people, my clients, they've said that this book has changed their lives. And every time they read it, it's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving. In fact, I'll just share with everybody here, if you can see my copy of the book. I've got highlights and notes and commentary, and I've got the point now where I'm marking down dates of different things that I've learned as I go through this book, because every time I pick it up and I read it, I find something new. My brain is now ready to learn more at a higher level. So really encourage everyone to get a copy of that. Now, because we're going to be talking about kids and how can we interact with the things that we want to do for our children and our grandchildren, and how can we all benefit from that process. And so I'm going to be using it because the tool I'm going to be showing you guys today is a visual tool to understand how we can create generational impact with the things that we're doing by learning to think and interact multi-generationally. So if you have kids or grandkids, this is going to be very applicable to you. If you don't have them yet, but you're thinking about it, this will be applicable to you. And even just understanding how you can interact with the system, we're going to be using kids as the epicenter. But the reality is you can do this at the you and me level as well. I just want to be able to show the impact of time by looking at, a 100-year lifespan, essentially. So that's kind of the premise of what we're going to do. So that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and dive straight in. And I'm going to bring up our primary kind of demonstration tool for today. And that's going to be, I just want to set this up for everybody to expand a little bit on what it is that we're looking at. So this is just a demonstration tool to show the impact of putting capital to work over a lifespan. We're putting capital to work over a span of a child's life, but we're going to talk through how we can use it ourselves as the parent or the grandparent, and then also have it available for the child to use, throughout their lifespan, and then when we're gone, and then how we're even going to be able to bless another generation that most likely doesn't even live yet. And I'll use my own family as an example here, but I just want to walk through a couple of things. So you can see I've got this little tab that's for age. All right. And so if you'll notice, as I move this up to say age 5, some of the numbers adjust on the table. Okay. And then you'll see I have something here looking at contributions. So we're going to set like a foundation, a baseline. I don't know if anyone on the call's ever played music before. I love music. I myself couldn't handle an instrument if you handed one to me other than maybe some bongo drums. But ultimately, when you're playing music, you want to make sure that people are reading off the same sheet. Otherwise, you're going to be playing 2 different tunes, and it's probably not going to sound very good. So our foundation here to read off the same sheet of music is that we're looking at putting away deposits into a program like this for a 20-year time frame. That's the basis of what we're looking at. Now, you can do more, you can do less, but for our foundation, we're going to set 20 years of suggested deposits. Most likely, when we're looking at the lifespan of a child, ideally, we're thinking, okay, college education. What are some of the things that our kids or our grandkids are going to be spending money on? How can we set them up? And it's very common for parents and grandkids to really start contributing early on to some initiative that's really important to them. Often education or college being one of those things. Now, college is obviously a rising cost. It's very expensive. I know in the States, it varies based on the college you want. Is it Ivy League, wherever you're at, but these costs are escalating. And so we want to make sure that we're putting capital aside to be able to accomplish the objective. And if the objective is being able to fund that, or maybe it's funding down payment on a home, maybe it's being there to fund a child's wedding, all these kinds of things that come up, we want to make sure we have the capital aside. But we want to put that capital into a machine where you can still access it if you need it, because life happens. If you're on the call, I'm guessing at some point in time in the last 18 months during the pandemic, life has happened to you. I know it's happened to me. So when these life events happen, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good, you need to be able to access capital to be able to fix problems that come up. Transmission breaks in your car. You need to fix the roof or fix the furnace or fix the hot water tank. Where are you going to access to capital? Well, this tool that we're going to use is a multitasking tool for money. We can put money into the tool builds up capital, and you can access money from that tool and put it to work in some other area of your life. That's really the key of the Child Millionaire platform. Now, it's important for us to talk about what that tool is. The tool that we use to design this program is a vehicle that is based around something that's been around for well over 100 years, about 250 years actually in the United States, and it's called the participating dividend paying whole life insurance contract. Now, most people understand that to be, okay, well, that's insurance. Okay, great. Well, that's wonderful, but we're not talking about insurance here. What we're talking about is a savings vehicle that allows you to efficiently grow capital so it's in constant motion and always working for you, while you're able to access it and put it to work in some other area of life. So we're really talking about a banking system that you can use to put capital to work in more than one location. That's the primary focus of what we have here today. Now, you'll notice if I increase this slider and we increase the amount of deposits that we're making for that first 20 years, you'll see quickly how all these numbers change. My graph changes here. And you can see the impact of, say, hey, if I have a 5-year-old and I'm putting $500 a month away for 20 years, what is the impact of that decision, and how much more capital am I going to have available, or is that child going to have available? And it's really, really powerful to see how that compound effect can take place over time. The only thing that allows compounding to work is if money stays sitting in a vehicle where the compounding actually happens. The problem is a lot of times we think we're getting compounding, but we go and take our capital out, and then we kill the compounding potential of doing that decision. So we're going to talk through that a little bit as we go through our example. Now I'm going to bring this back down, and I'm going to use 200 for example, because I'm going to use an example that's relevant to me, and I'm going to relate that to you guys because I want to speak from my personal experience. I have my son Nathan, and I have my daughter Nora. Now I got a program just like this set up for my kids right when they were age 0. So about 16 days of age is the earliest you could do this. So I'm going to use age 0, and I'm going to use this $200 level because that's very much in alignment with what I did with my kids. It's actually a hair under that. I think it's around $180, but right in that ballpark. So you can see that it's going to build up capital over time. Now, what do we want to be able to use capital for over a child's lifespan, and how do we want to support that? More importantly, how can I and my wife, Heather, be able to use that in our lifespan? If you're doing this and you're putting away things for your kids, we put so much of our effort and our energy and our capital towards trying to make the best possible life that we can for our children and for our grandchildren. And often we choose to do without. We'll do for them things that we wouldn't do for ourselves. Now, John, I don't know about you, but have you experienced that?
I'm still experiencing.
Still experiencing it. And not only that, we speak to people all the time, and often that's the case because we want to give our children a better life than we had. That's a very common theme that we hear from folks. In this program, what we're trying to help people understand is that you can help your child create an environment that does the things that you want, but not sacrifice your ability to be able to put capital to work for all the things that you also need to do, which probably supports what you're doing for your kids anyway, as an example. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flip to the next tab here. And this next tab is, starting at age 20. So we're going to take an example of age 20. What are something that we want to start encouraging our children to do? Part of the idea here is that we've all heard that experience that if you start saving early, quote unquote saving early, the earlier you do that, the more impact it's going to have because you have the advantage of time, that ability for things to happen over time. Well, I know I heard that when I was a kid, and would you imagine that I didn't start saving early enough and I didn't save enough, and I could have more capital today had I done those things and had my parents, kind of beat that lesson down on me a little bit more importantly. So what we're doing is we're using this tool and this platform to also teach stewardship of capital to our children. So in this example, again, I started with $200 a month for my child at age 0. I now have access to a pile of capital. It's about $49,000 using this mechanism. Now, that will vary a little bit based on everyone's circumstances, based on some things like design, and that's where John comes in. John custom designs these programs so that they're the perfect fit for what your budget is, what you're working with, children's age, all those kind of things. And he's able to implement this process so that you can create results just like this, oftentimes even better, using the tools that he has available. And that's where John's expertise really comes in. But in my example, we've got a person here who's got about $49,000 of accessible capital. What we want to do is we want to teach the child. And so an example, I use my son, Nathan. I'm going to say, hey, look, Nathan, it's time that you need to start looking to put capital to work for yourself. And you need to start developing the skills of saving regularly, repetitiously, and starting to understand how you can put money to work in different areas of your life. Now, he might want to start a business. Maybe he wants to sell products on Amazon. Maybe he wants to, build a video game that he wants to sell. I'm not sure what he's going to want to do 20 years from now, and I don't know what the technology is going to be. But he may choose to do that, or he may choose to put it into some kind of an investment account or a savings account. So we're going to take $3,000 by using this money as collateral. We're going to borrow $3,000 to put it to work. So our capital is still growing because we never touched it. It continues to grow uninterrupted. We're able to take $3,000 out and put it to work. Now I'm going to say, Nathan, the only way this is going to work is if you commit to replenishing that pile of money so that you can access money again the following year. So Nathan's going to commit to putting $250 a month away, and he's going to replenish that pile of capital. So the very next year, he can take $3,000 and do it again. And the very next year, he can take $3,000 and do it again. And he's going to repeat that process. And what we're doing is we're creating new habits. These habits are going to be instrumental to the impact that's going to happen in my son Nathan's life, or in this case, any child, or grandchild's life, by implementing this tool. Now, the other thing I want to understand here is really important is that we had 49,000, we're only using 3. There's still more capital available to work with there. What are some other things that, as an experience here, I'll just use myself as an example. What else could my wife and I be using that extra capital for? Well, perhaps there's an education that we need to help fund for my son. Could we be using it for that purpose? I would say yes. Maybe my son wants to go and get a down payment on a house. Could we use it towards that initiative? Maybe he met a girl and he wants to get married a little early. Not sure how I'll feel about that, if he's ready or not, but I'm going to support him in his decision. So perhaps there's money that's available for that. So what are some of the other things that we're going to be spending money on in our life anyway, as parents, that we can start implementing this capital for? Maybe I've got a business myself and I have to fund some inventory, and I'm waiting on a big project where it's not going to pay back out for, say, 90 days or, a year. And I can then take that repayment of capital and I can put it back inside of this program. So you can think of this program as a warehouse for capital. We need to store capital in some place where then we can access it easily, put it to use, and then when we're done using it and we have the money returned, we need to put it back into our warehouse so that we can use it again. Effectively, that's what we're creating here. I'm just using my son, my daughter in this example, as an efficient vehicle for the purpose of accomplishing an objective of warehousing capital and putting capital to work and teaching valuable life lessons. So that's age 20. We're going to skip ahead now to the next tab here. We're going to go to age 30. Now, the American dream, home ownership has often been considered the American dream. John, am I catching that correctly? That's at least what the TV tells me.
Yeah.
And so we don't know what the house values are going to be, where our kids are going to live, what their objectives are going to be. But if that's a common thing, and that's something that's important to you as a family, for your family, whether you're, again, parent or grandparent, you want to help support that initiative. We don't want to just leave them capital, because we just give them capital. What happens? Often it disappears. Same idea as, people win the lottery. How long does the money stay when they win the lottery? What are the statistics? The money's gone in what time frame? Typically 2 to 3 years, the money disappears.
Yeah, certainly less than 5. Yeah.
So we have to help understand, how do we teaching stewardship of money? And a program like this allows us to do that over a lifespan. So here at age 30, in this sample that we're using, where we funded $200, a month, only for the first 20 years. So in this example, I haven't put any more money in now for 10 years. We have about $77,000 we can work with. Well, I don't know what kind of down payment that's going to get us, but what if I want to do 20% down? Well, I can't get a $400,000 house for that, but I could get a $350,000 condo or a house. Now, maybe that doesn't mean much in the area that you live. So maybe you need a much more expensive property. Okay, well, I can get 5% down on an $800,000 house, or potentially on $1 million home with that kind of capital. So again, we don't know the circumstance of where they're going to be making that decision. All we can do is put our best foot forward today to start the process so that these life events, which every family is going to encounter, we're setting the stage to allow us to work for the benefit of our child or grandchild while we're also participating in that experience. So that's the key here, is that we're trying to create multitasking of capital over a lifespan where everyone can benefit. Now, obviously, if we had a property here, and I'll bring this back down to, let's say, $600,000 level, we are able to accomplish the objective of getting that property. We have our down payment. Well, what could that turn into over the next 40 years if they stayed in that home? Well, if we have a normalized appreciation rate over a long period of time, that could turn into a really large asset for our child. Now I'm going to go to the next tab here. In the next tab, you guys will recognize a pattern. We're going about every 10 years here. Now there's obviously more life events that are going to happen. And I don't know about you guys, but most of my life events don't happen every 10 years. There's a lot of things that happen in the years in between, right? So we have to use our imagination and think right now for yourself. What's an experience that you've had in your own lifetime where, boy, oh boy, if only I would have had access to something like this that my parents had put together for me, where I would be able to access capital. And then when things turned around or my life, changed again, I could put that capital back, but the whole thing kept growing over the whole time frame. It's just such an incredible experience that we can make. Now, at age 40, we're going to say, well, maybe we want to get into income real estate. Maybe you can't buy a $350,000 house in your neck of the woods, but perhaps there's an area where you can, or you can go buy even a multi-unit property for that kind of capital, depending on what area you live or what, where you're looking to purchase. Again, can we access down payment capital? We get, create some cash flow over that period of time. Eventually it builds up and it increases with time over inflation. You pay the property off. What could that build up to over time in this experience? The next tab we're going to do is age 50. And this one, again, we've got about $200,000 and $7,000 available in our program. The key takeaway here is that I want people to understand is that we only contributed for the first 20 years. No new money has gone into this program since the 20th year, which means for 30 years, we haven't put another dime in. Now, I don't know about you, but if you had a savings vehicle where every time you put capital in, all your numbers got better, wouldn't you want to put some more money into it? Now, we're going to show you what that would look like in a moment. But the key takeaway here is that we built all this with either one or two generations. It could be a combination of grandparent and parent working together to create this structure for the child. But now we're going to have the ability for the child to keep contributions and keep putting that money to work over their lifespan. And so in this example, we have about $207,000. Well, what do we want to do with it? Could we put that to work in a business? Maybe we can go buy a franchise and we have an operating business that produces capital. Maybe we have an existing business and we're putting it to work in our own business. Or we find maybe it's, Bitcoin or whatever the thing is that we want to be able to put capital to work on. We're going to have the ability to control that outcome. Maybe not what the investment does. We can't control that, but we can control our access to capital because we've built a machine that allows that to happen. We're multitasking money. Money is growing inside of this policy that we set up 50 years ago. And we have the ability to access it through the collateral mechanism, which is very simple. It's one piece of paper. Sometimes it's as simple as a phone call to the insurance company. Money lands in your bank account, boom, you can go put it to work in some other area of your life. So we have the ability to stack these things together over a lifespan. I'm going to go to the next tab here, and this is all about legacy. Now, if you're watching this, I'm not sure where you're at in your circumstance of life, but one of the things that we hear people, and John, we've talked about this before, is how do we want to, we don't have a best before date. I don't have a stamp on the back of my neck, and I'm sure everyone listening to this call doesn't, that says, what day am I going to leave planet Earth? When am I going to graduate? Okay. I don't know what that day is. I do know what's going to happen. I know that we've got death and we got texts. Those are the two knowns in life, right? So how are we going to make sure that capital shows up when it's most needed to make sure everyone's looked after and we can solve a whole bunch of problems that are left behind? Unfortunately, a lot of people won't end up having coverage because they got the stuff that really wasn't going to be there. It's not going to last. That won't be the case for someone who implements this Child Millionaire program, because we're creating a legacy that will be there no matter what. It's guaranteed to be there. And the day that, now in my example here, I'm picking on my son, Nathan, the day that my son, Nathan, leaves this world, a big fat chunk of tax-free money is going to show up. Now, if there's any outstanding stuff on the policy that he's been using because he was investing and buying houses and putting that money to work in other areas, then the death benefit will be received and it'll pay off whatever's outstanding. And there's a net amount that shows up tax-free to the next generation. Well, in my circumstance, guys, that generation doesn't even exist yet. It's not even here. So if something, heaven forbid, happens early in life to my son, which I certainly hope is not the case, but we don't know what the future holds. Well, that capital is going to come to my wife and I, and then we'll probably put a foundation of something together and do something really nice in my son's memory. But we'll have capital to help, take the time that we need to grieve properly, do all the things that we need, and then be able to move on and build something for my son's legacy when he's not here. So we have control over that because we have known guarantees in place. Really, really important. And one thing I just want to show you here is what's the impact if we put less into this program versus if we put more into it over that time frame. What kind of a legacy are we going to be able to create? Again, this is where working with John, you're going to be able to customize and really see on a one-to-one basis how that might work for you in your circumstance, because maybe you're in a position where only 50 is what you can do today, or maybe none of this is even sufficient and you want to put much more of that into a program. And maybe you don't want to do it on one of your children or grandchildren. Maybe you want to do it for you. Again, this is where the customization of this comes to effect. We just want to talk about the lifespan and the utilization of capital. Our need for capital while we're alive on planet Earth is so dramatic that if we solve for that need using this mechanism, we're going to end up with so much of this tax-free coverage that we won't even be able to get it past the insurance company. So it's a really good problem to have. Now, I want to flip to the last tab here. This is where, in my opinion, this is the most important thing. We call this the golden child. The reason this is so important is because we get a chance to stretch our imagination. And I want to use this to talk now about how we're setting this up for our child, but how as a parent, we can begin to implement something here in this experience as well. And this is where we're going to really kind of connect those things together. Now, in this example, again, we only put $200 a month in, and we did that for a 20-year period. So the total contribution for the parent and the grandparent is only $48,000 over that time frame. Now, we can continue contributions. Now, in here, we're going to show the child doing it, but the reality is that could be me. It could be me and my wife. It could be my son or your child or whatever. It doesn't matter. The ability to keep contributions going is what is key. So I want you guys to take a look at our graph down here and just notice what happens if we continue putting $50 a month into that program. Notice how at age 75, for my son, and my example, I'm picking on my son here, we went from $754,000 of capital available to $903,000. The only difference was that we put $50 a month still into the program. That's an extra $33,000 over a lifespan, which means we put in contributions at $81,000. This was our input, and this was our output. Now, I'd like to think that my son's going to be alive longer than 75, which means that's going to keep growing. But just understand, what's the difference between age 65 and 75 over that 10-year period? What's the impact of that compound effect actually working over a lifespan? Because we're not stopping compounding. When you pull capital out of something like an investment you have, say a Roth or a 401k, and you pull that out, you've lost the ability for it to keep growing. Here, we're never giving up that ability. It's in constant motion over our lifespan. It's the only place where uninterrupted compounding can truly take place. And it's got a wrapper of tax-free money around it that's going to bless someone's life. I may not be here to see that for my son. In fact, I hope that's the case. But I am going to use some of the capital while I am here. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Now, let's take this one step further. And let's say, what would happen if we actually kept funding the whole 200 over that period of time? Well, now the child's put in 132,000. Total lifetime contributions is 180. What's the impact we're looking at between that decision? So all this is a decision. Do I keep putting capital in or do I stop putting capital in? And the good news is that you're the only one that can make that choice. You and your child, or whoever, in this example, we're talking about a multi-generational circumstance, whoever's the owner of that contract. And if I'm gone and Richard kicks the bucket, Well, my son, when he's old enough, can automatically become the owner of this thing and keep that going. As long as he's got the right habits in place, he likely will. That's why we spend so much time talking about stewardship of capital. Now, here's what I want to talk about. I'm going to give you guys some reference points. So I'm 40. In fact, I just turned 40 2 days ago. Yay me. But I want to look forward into time. And so I'm going to go here down 25 years later, and I'm going to try and make this a bit bigger. You'll see if we kept funding this program, there's about $80,000 available in that program. Well, that puts me and my wife roughly around age 65. 5 years later, it's 113, then it's 155, and so it continues growing. So just imagine I'm at this stage of the game. Now, I have several of these programs on myself and my wife already. So we already do this for ourselves. Plus, I have a plan on my son, and I have one on my daughter. The one on my son and my daughter are virtually identical. So could I not essentially take, and I'm going to get out a little drawing tool here. I'm going to try and draw on my screen for everybody. If that says 80,000 at roughly my age 65, and I've got two of them, then I have, roughly speaking, about 160,000 in capital between my son and my daughter's policy, plus my own, plus all my other assets and everything else that I've been doing. And then it accumulates and continues to grow. So if I just high level, let's go 10 years out, and it's 155 for my son. So let's grab that number. So 10 years later, it's, see, drawing tool here. 10 years later, it's 155. I know one of these is the right drawing tool. There we go. 155 times 2. Someone should help me with the third grade arithmetic on that.
310.
310. Okay, great. Okay, so between that 10-year period, the program continued to grow. Now, at that stage of the game, who's likely funding it? Is it dad and mom that are funding it, or is it my son and my daughter that are funding these programs? Well, if I've done a good job, it better be my son and my daughter that are funding it. Because if they don't fund it, am I going to give it to them when I'm gone? No, because I get to control the rules. I'm the patriarch of the family, and I want to establish foundational rules, how they're going to engage with what I refer to as the family banking system, so that we can all prosper together. Because at some point in time, guess what? Dad's going to kick the bucket. And when I go, there's a big fat bunch of policies just like this that are going to pay out, and my kids are going to get a tax-free windfall, which means I'm going to use their program until I decide not to use it, and they'll get it when I'm gone. Plus, it'll be reset to zero when I leave, when I walk off planet Earth. So this is about multi-generational thinking. So if my wife and I start using that capital, we can be using that to supplement some of our own retirement income if we want to at that stage of the game. Now, that won't be enough to probably help us out, but every little bit helps out. And this is just one bucket of where money is going to come from in our circumstance. We have other assets and other programs just like this. The key thing is I want to identify this, because this keeps moving forward and it's in constant motion. My child's going to be able to get to use it. There eventually will hopefully be some wonderful, very beautiful, very happy, smiley grandchildren at some future point, which I'm very excited about one day to become a grandfather. And meanwhile, my wife and I up here, we're going to use it too. So we're now in a situation where we've covered 3 generations with one benefit, one program, one tool, one line of thinking to help cover the objectives of things we're going to be spending money on anyway. We're going to spend money on a college education, most likely. Probably going to be spending money on some kind of a wedding or weddings in the future, most likely. I'm going to want to buy investment real estate or buy down, real estate, or help my kids in some way get into some real estate, most likely. Going to need to buy cars that I need to drive, my wife needs to drive, and my kids are going to have to drive. If we did nothing else, but we just added up, we asked this question. I'm going to erase all my drawings here. We asked this question: how many vehicles have you purchased up to this point in time in your life? For the average person, when I ask this question, normally the average, North American, whether they're Canadian or American, they're asking. So typically over my lifespan, about 10 cars. Some people it's like 25, and some people it's like, oh, I'll probably only do 5 or 6. Well, if you're going to do that. Well, then what about your spouse? Okay, well, if your spouse is going to do 10 cars, okay, great. Well, we're at 20 just for you guys. What about the kids? Well, if we add the kids up and then we add the kids' spouses when they're older, and we add all those numbers up, that's an awful lot of money walking out the door to cars that you don't get to use and keep for your own retirement. By implementing a program like this, like Child Millionaire, you can now begin to work as a family through family banking, and you can fund those cars and return the car payments that would have otherwise gone to someone else back into the system so that all members of the family can prosper. So there you go. There's a lot of things that we just covered there. And I appreciate you, John, for letting me get on my soapbox a little bit. I warned you that might happen.
No, you did great.
And so with that, I'd like to maybe just turn it back over to you, John, and just talk a little bit about what are some takeaways that you have from our conversation today, things you and I have been discussing anyway, and maybe share some of your final thoughts, I guess, on how you see this being applicable to your clients and the people that you know, where they're able to start really implementing a new way of thinking about their financial life so that more people can prosper.
Sure. Well, thank you. First of all, I want to say if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box and try to get to them now, or, I can get back with you at some point. So, for me, really what I'm seeing, because I do this. So, when I look at it, I don't want to say too much, but the fact is that, we're going to grab the money from somewhere. When we have those life events or just regular life stuff that goes on. But, when something comes up that we're not ready for, we either, take it out of our cash flow. Maybe something else suffers a bit, or we got to go sell something. It could be stocks. It could be, and then that money, once we extend that money to someone else for whatever that need is, that money's gone. When we take, I'll use an example, like, when a leach field in New Hampshire, stops working.
That's an expensive fix.
It's pretty expensive. And, where do you grab that from? And if you've saved, great. You've got some cash. But even so, you're going to grab that cash out of your bank account and you're going to pay it to the contractor, and he's got the money, and you'll never have that money again. It won't ever compound. It won't grow. It won't, in an uninterrupted way. It's been interrupted and it's gone. So I think that's the emphasis for me, is that, somebody's going to be making the financing money. And it's, in most cases in North America, it's not the consumer. This is a way for the consumer to take back the financing function. And so that's the real power. So that's my soapbox.
I love it. Thanks, John. So again, I would encourage everyone, if you haven't already talked to John about getting a copy of this book, Becoming Your Own Banker, again, it's only 92 pages. I would highly encourage it. I can only tell you what it's done for my own life. It's literally changed everything about my life in a positive way. It's, in my opinion, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I think if there's 10 books in the world that you're going to read, that should be one of them. And John, he has access to those. And I would also say that, in comparison to something like a 529 plan or whatever, where you might be looking to save capital for, a child's education and everything, there's a lot of rules and restrictions to those, and they vary state by state. Whereas here, if you wanted to do something like that, you still could do it using this program. But even when your child goes to education, the money comes out of that account to fund education. The Child Millionaire platform is still growing because you have this permanent contract with the life insurance company that's put in place. And you did it not for the insurance benefit. You did it because of constant cash accumulation over a human lifespan. That is the power of what you can do when you have a tool that can't be stopped. And it's just the most efficient vehicle to implement a process like this. So again, really, really happy to do this, John. Thank you for letting me just share out something that I'm deeply passionate about and I love, and to be a part of this. And I hope everyone, watching and who's been able to watch the recording gets a ton of value out of it.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to be working with you and have you present to my audience here. I also want to share that I put a link in the chat window. If you'd like to schedule a time on my calendar, please, grab that link now, or click on it, and it'll go away in a second here. So, or you can email me at john@nashcashflow.com and be happy to, connect with you and figure out a time we can answer any questions that you have. But again, thank you everyone for joining us, and talk to you sometime soon. Thanks again, Richard. Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, and Andrew, I see you got a question there. Is there, oh, and he just jumped off. Is there anyone who shouldn't be doing this? So we missed Andrew's question, but we'll answer it here anyway for the recording. Is that, yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's anyone that shouldn't be doing it. However, there might be people who aren't able to do it. That's a possibility. And
Sure.
I can speak to that, even just directly. I recently had a young family, and they applied for programs just like we looked at here. And two of their kids, or two daughters, who were both, they spend a lot of money, like $1,000 a month just on dance classes, because they're in competitive dance. So they're going to be running some of the costs of dance right through their program. But their youngest, their son, was not approved, and he's postponed. He's going to have to wait for some kind of a behavioral assessment. I don't know what the insurance company said, but anyway, the end result is wasn't able to get insured presently. And we do have that happen. We do see it happen with kids. It's rarer for sure, but it's a real problem. And so I know for me and many of my clients, having gone through the experience of seeing, a parent not be able to get the coverage on their kid when they want to create this initiative for them, it's heartbreaking. It really is. So the sooner and the earlier when you find out, and you could get, in my opinion, a child insured, the better off you are, because you just never know what can happen. I'll tell you one more quick story. Great client of mine, amazing guys, mortgage broker, wonderful man. He had his first daughter is about 19, and then he's got two more that are much younger, with it's the kind of blended family situation, that his second family, I guess you could say. And his youngest, not the youngest daughter, the middle child, she got covered. We have a great program on her, and we actually have something called guaranteed insurability built in, so we can get more on her at a later date. However, now, about 5 years later, after we initiated that contract, she's developed type 1 diabetes. And because of that diabetes diagnosis, it's going to be very difficult for her to get future coverage.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we have this in place already, number one. And number two, because some of the customization that can happen, that's where John steps in, again, depending on the carrier and all that sort of thing. That's why you need to have a coach in this process. We were able to institute some guaranteed options so that we can add up more. We can get more coverage on her in various formats at different stages of her life. And it's likely going to be the only way that she'll be able to get more coverage in her own life for her own future family. So not doing this can be detrimental in many ways, other than the cash. And there's other, reasons to consider this, especially for a child. And I'm very deeply passionate about that, because I've seen it when a parent isn't able to get that initiated, and it's heartbreaking. So the earlier and the sooner you can get started, at least verify, at least find out if you can, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, once they're approved, there's guaranteed insurability, and there's a number of times that you might be able to increase the amount in different increments over your lifetime. So if you do become disabled or something like that along the way, it's still, you're already, insured, and you can increase it, even though if you try to get a new policy, you could be denied. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because that's powerful.
It literally could become one of the greatest gifts that you give a child, a grandparent or parent. And we can leave behind money, we can leave behind photos, and we can leave behind some experiences, and we can leave behind what we teach them. Of all those things, what we teach them is going to be the most important. And I think, because that's what's going to help shape their life. But rather than leaving them money, we can leave them a tool that accumulates money no matter what. And, that, to me, that will be there to bless another generation beyond, that isn't yet, even possibly not even yet alive. And if they decide not to have, as an example, my kids decide not to have kids, that's a possibility. They can choose to say, maybe they want to support their church. Maybe they want to support a charitable cause that they care deeply about, cancer research or MS Society or Parkinson's or something to that effect. And they could leave behind that capital to that initiative so they can leave a legacy still that goes beyond that, supports and helps many, many more people. And in fact, if they did that, they're also going to get a huge tax, credit or whatever, depending on, states
Yeah.
and all that different rules,
Yeah.
which means it'll offset additionally any income from their final tax year from the other assets. So again, it's just a win-win-win scenario that provides the maximum amount of control for the longest period of time.
Yep. And that's why Nelson called it the infinite banking concept. So there's an infinite amount of possibilities for what you can do. And as my dad always said, keep your options open. So this is one of the things that allows you to do that.